Welcome to the Demand Gen Club podcast, the first podcast exclusively dedicated to B2B demand generation secrets and best practices as shared by some of the top leaders in the industry. This podcast is brought to you by SaaS MQL, the account-based marketing agency based in Redwood City, California. They help venture-funded SaaS companies scale demand generation from target accounts. By combining intent data, automation, and a proven methodology, SaaS MQL can help your startup generate millions of dollars in sales opportunities within a few months. To learn more, go to saasmql.com.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Demand Gen Club podcast. I'm your host, Franco Caporale. Our guest today is Fanette Jobard, Senior Demand Generation Manager at JFrog. JFrog's mission is to transform the way enterprises manage and release software updates. With more than 6,000 customers, JFrog is the leading DevOps platform that empowers developers to code high-quality applications that securely flow to end users without interruptions. At JFrog, Fanette is responsible for driving sales opportunities and revenue in North America through integrated campaigns. Prior to JFrog, she had a chance to build lead generation engines for companies like Docker, Algolia, and more recently Screen as their head of demand generation. So I'm really happy to welcome today Fanette Jobard, Senior Demand Generation Manager at JFrog. Fanette, I'm very excited to have you on the episode today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I want to start right away. Tell us a little bit about your story, your background. Where did you work? What was your role? And tell us about what's your role today and what's your company.
So I started my career in analytics and media research. I would say heavy statistics-centric roles in France. And at one point I moved to the US 7 years ago. When I moved to the US, I was looking for a job where I can put in practice that data-driven mindset. And naturally, demand generation and growth marketing were kind of the next logical steps. So I started doing growth marketing for Docker. At the time, it was a small startup. Then I own demand generation at Algolia from, I would say, 10 million ARR to over 50 million ARR. And so really moving up market with the company. More recently, I worked in a Series A startup where I led demand generation, Screen. And even more recently, 1 month ago, I joined JFrog in the demand generation team to own the integrated campaigns and the marketing in North America.
Can you tell us a little more about JFrog, your current company, how big it is, who's in your team, and what are your exact responsibilities there?
Yeah, so JFrog is a newly public company. It's a pretty, big startup. I think there's more than 700 employees all over the world. The demand gen team is about 15 people with amazing leadership, and we are covering any kind of channel in terms of demand gen.
And so now you're working in this, more established, larger company or startup. I mean, still, I don't know if you can define it as a startup, JFrog, but definitely a more established company.
Yeah.
So how was the impact of joining a company like this after having worked for, Series A, Series B, more early stage kind of companies before? And how did your approach change?
Yeah, so I was really, I have done demand gen for all the different stages, and I was missing the pre-IPO to public stage. And what I was geeky about was to understand how demand gen changed based on what kind of company you're promoting, what kind of product you're promoting. So you don't do the same demand gen in a Series A startup as in a public company. And that was really what motivated me to join a bigger team. As you work in a bigger team, you think more strategically and also collectively. So it's no longer your own ownership, but it's more how do you work with a team to ship the campaigns and track the result as well.
Did in terms of your daily operation, or like how do you implement this program? What do you see? How do you see the differences?
Yeah, in terms of the daily operation, I would say so when I think of it, I did a big leap from the Series A to the public company. In the Series A, as a demand gen marketer, you're usually one of the first marketers, so you tend to own a lot of stuff. You're owning the marketing operations, you're owning the digital aspect of marketing, you're owning also some other channels, working closely with product. In a public company, you're a little bit less operational and more strategic, and really it's more like about like how do you project manage a campaign and have all the different elements of that campaign coming together.
So it's a lot of project managing in the larger company versus actual execution directly and kind of moving things forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, exactly.
And in terms of how, like, I want to know a little bit about your favorite tech stack. And I assume, in previous company, you might have provided input about what tech stack you use. How does it work as you join a larger company?
So I was pretty close to marketing operation for like all my previous roles. It's pretty, the new role is actually pretty new for me because I'm not owning the marketing operation, but I need to work with people that are expert in that domain. The tech stack, the main difference is, I would say, like when you join a smaller startup, you have to build the tech stack. So it's really a matter of like building for efficiency. You don't always have like an extensive budget in order to build your tech stack, but the startup will grow. So how do you build for efficiency and for the long term? In a bigger company, your tech stack is often legacy. So you have some piece of the stack that are like from other teams, but also something you have also like internal teams that are building in-house the equivalent of some tools that you're purchasing. So, for example, I'm taking a pretty simple use case. When you're in a small startup, you always purchase some kind of landing page builders. When you're like in a bigger startup, you usually have a design and integration team that is building some kind of landing page template for you, and you can scale your demand gen page on those templates.
There's a lot of outsourcing in Series A and Series B companies, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And you have to switch all your ads in order to do a little bit of everything. So remember doing some email design. It's still funny when I receive the email of like really companies, and it's still my design from 5 years ago. So that's it's always like a
Yeah,
fun, I would say.
they don't get updated very, very often.
Yeah.
In terms of like, tell us some names in terms of like what you guys are using as platform that helps you on your daily work or to build campaigns.
Yeah, so I will probably speak of my previous experience because JFrog is pretty new. So kind of a classic stack, I would say Marketo and Salesforce are like the central pieces of the stack. They are obviously communicating with each other to track and assign to own what I will call the sales marketing end-off process. And then around those two tools, you have a bunch of like satellites tools. So depending on how you want to build your stack, you obviously will need a webinar tool. So I know at JFrog we have On24, and then you can also like add other gravitational tools. One tool that I really enjoy working with was MatKudu. It's a predictive scoring tool and engine. And I know that now they have more advanced features that are like even predicting the revenue channel by channel. So it's pretty cool in terms of reporting. You have the attribution piece. So if you have Marketo, they will bundle Marketo with Visible, but you have also like Lean Data that's doing an amazing work in making your attribution more visible.
Which leads me very well into my next question, because I know you are very, very strong about attribution and you focus a lot of the time, and you believe in very clean attribution. So I want to know, what do you recommend? What's your advice to track this level of attribution, particularly at the top of the funnel, where sometimes it's very hard to track. Even more if it's offline channels, like, I don't know if you guys run billboard campaigns or if you do anything that is not digital. How do you track that?
Yeah, no, an excellent question. I would say with attribution, always keep in mind that the simpler is always the better, because even if you're thirsty for a more advanced attribution model, you will still have to explain attribution to the execs, to the sales team. And really, in this case, is always the simpler the better. Don't overcomplicate it, your attribution. You don't do attribution the same way for a Series A startup as a Series C or a more advanced startup. But I would say really tracking the first touch is always key, at least for you on the demand gen team, because the first touch is always like where you spend the money in the first place. So it could be an event, could be as you mentioned, the billboard, it could be your Facebook ads. So really, you need to be as close as the money as possible, and being able to track that. For digital ads, it's really down to the UTM parameters. It's still one of the best way to track the interactions. Of course, it has its limits. I'm working with the DevOps audience and DevOps personas, and those people loves ad blocker. And so sometimes you're, or just removing the UTM tags from an URL. So sometimes you're losing maybe 15 to 20% of your attribution. But really, UTM parameters are key to track the offline channels. So I would say in the event scenario, it's always good to have a demand gen ambassador at the booth and making sure if the sales are actually tracking people or recording the business cards properly. So how do you can ease that process, or even create some kind of incentive for the sales to enter the leads in the system. So that way you can track your ROI of the event and if it's worth it to renew the event. For the billboard, it's pretty tricky. So I think it's down to the promotion code. If you have a promotion code, it's something you can't really. I remember trying to track geolocated visits to the region of a billboard in San Francisco. You have to accept that it's really working for your awareness, and that there is a bunch of things you won't be able to track.
Yeah, I guess at that point it becomes more of a correlation that you drive, right? And see that when you started running the billboard, maybe your traffic went up and other metrics that you can see that correlated. But yeah, it's not going to be a direct attribution, right, at that point.
I remember when you're doing some partnership with conferences, I think you can with the tracking of the IP address, you can be down into a specific neighborhood. And I remember one of our partner mentioned the company name on stage on the Moscone Center, and really seeing all those Moscone IP address connected to the websites in Google Analytics was a good indicator of the awareness that the event drove.
Oh, that's awesome way to correlate the traffic and the source. So from the attribution, I want to understand a little more your approach to ABM, because that also obviously involves attribution. You talk about Mercuro and lead scoring and everything. Do you guys track attribution and scoring also at the account level? And what is your approach to ABM versus inbound marketing and content marketing?
Yeah, so on the ABM side, it's kind of the same as attribution. It's was really kept simple. So it was more like building a list of targeted accounts, and tracking those targeted accounts all along the website on all the different interaction with our brand.
So for the attribution in particular, it gets, at least in my opinion, it gets very tricky when you're trying to decide, you have multiple people from that account that are engaging across different campaigns. How do you weight that, right? Because I don't know, if a junior marketing person in the same company is different than the VP, and maybe they come from different channels. How do you weight that engagement at the campaign level when you look at the account instead of leads?
Yeah, no, totally. So in terms of ABM, so you're obviously targeting different personas. The idea is to like really penetrate the accounts and then having different piece of content, having different assets towards a different persona of the account. So for example, for products like Algolia or JFrog, it's really you can target the developer as you can target at the same time the VP engineering. So of course they won't reply to the same kind of asset and offers. How do you track that? It's also ABM is also a partnership with the sales. So you have really also to partner with them and track their interactions. So you have to think about like two timelines: the timeline of marketing and demand gen interaction from the accounts and the sales interaction to the accounts. And it's a mix of those two interactions. So maybe the accounts really created an opportunity just after one of your webinar, but just after this opportunity there is another opportunity, maybe an upsell opportunity that has been created by the sales. So how it's really a matter of, I would say, accepting the sales as part of the demand gen team and accepting the demand gen team as being part of the sales team, and having that integrated timeline of all the different touches on the account.
And so tell us more about how you work with the sales team to coordinate this and orchestrate these campaigns. And I'm sure there is a difference again between the early stage startup and the established company, but like what is a good best practice to make this thing work?
Yeah. When you're in a Series A company, your demand gen is really part of, I would say, almost part of a sales team. So you're working closely with the team and the sales leadership. You're also creating your goals, target revenues, depending on their own growth. So if they plan to hire, let's say, 4 mid-market execs, you need to adjust your demand gen plan in order to be able to feed those 4 mid-market account execs. And you really need that close connection. So attending all the meetings, trying to connect with them. Obviously, with the COVID situation, it's pretty hard to be in the same room, the same open space, and have that energy, sales energy with you, but like really trying to connect with them as much as possible. On a bigger company, it's really down. So the sales team is also more complex. So it's divided into different teams, sometimes into different pods where you're mixing different sales role, and you also have like sales specialized by product. So really identifying who's doing what, how do you communicate with them proactively. It's always like being proactive on the communication side, essentially on the accounts. So in bigger company, there is chance that we already have some contacts on the accounts we are targeting. So really keeping them in the loop of all the different initiatives. The sales time is precious because it's really a factor of money. So time is money. So you don't want to have them lose their time over of reading your email. So you have to find the best way of communicating with them, joining their meeting, organizing some kind of virtual happy hour with them to connect.
Do you think it works better when the SDR report into marketing, or it makes it easier, or it doesn't change much?
This is a good question. I always ask myself that question because I found myself like in smaller startup where I was doing the marketing operation or owning the marketing sales end off. You have a feeling of working 50% of your time with the SDRs directly, mentoring them, answering their questions, being proactive on the campaign which you shipped. But I think like SDR should really stay under sales. So why is that? It's because they are a sales role and they are like a temporary role. And so I think if they want to progress in the company, learn new things, become an AE, they need to be mentored by a sales leadership and not a marketing leadership. So they should, for their personal and career growth, they should stay under the sales management. And then I think it's also good for them to be under the sales management because they are also sales marketing link. It pushes marketing to connect with the sales, build that relation with the SDR, build that marketing operation hygiene, and really connect with the sales team.
Awesome. Yes, I see that working pretty well, especially if there is enough alignment between demand generation and sales, then it works really smoothly. I want to also ask you about events, because obviously 2020 has been a very particular year for event, and now we see all these virtual events popping up everywhere. A lot of companies have reallocated budget to virtual events. I want to know what's your opinion on these virtual events, and how are you planning next year? Is it going to be all virtual events again, or are you hoping at some point to reallocate some budget to some live events?
Yeah, so I'm kind of proud of my year. When I did some planning for 2020 last year, I was thinking of allocating all my event budget for Q1 2020, and especially essentially on January and February. And I thought it was kind of disbalanced, but I kept that budget that way. So I'm kind of proud because because I didn't invest it in sponsorship later this year. So I'm probably one of the only demand gen person that made revenue from physical events in 2020. But then the strategy moved toward more like digital events. It's really amazing to see how the marketing teams adapted, and I have a lot of friends that are working in field events, field marketing, and that switched everything to webinars. So we are doing more demand generation than event marketing nowadays. And so I've seen a movement where we had a wave of creating more webinars, workshops, so being creative with the different online formats. And it was pretty successful until, I would say, recently, until September. And since September, and I've seen that in a lot of also other friends working in demand gen, I think we noticed some kind of online event fatigue. And so that will be challenging for next year. I think that fatigue can be explained by the competition. There is so many new webinars, and we are not only competing now against B2B webinars, but we are also competing against, I don't know, online therapy session, homeschooling, online classes, a bunch of other stuff that are not only demand gen podcasts, that are not only like B2B marketing related. And so competition is really tough, and we need to be, I think, more creative for next year. So strategy, I think next year will be to still keep high pace in terms of webinar, but also this year we created a lot of content. And so what about like optimizing what we already created and repackage, redigest it in a different formats. So next year will be, I think part of that will be to keep that pace on virtual events, repackage what have been existing this year. And also, why not create some kind of hybrid formats where you can have maybe the speakers in a room, rent a hotel, some room where you can social distance, have the speakers there, record the session, and then create some kind of online event where people can attend. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what will be the strategy for others next year in terms of online event. I think this webinar fatigue is a little bit concerning. So curious to see if it's just the season or if it's a long term.
You don't think that live events are a thing of the past? Like people seems to be pretty eager to go back to meet in person and conferences and trade shows.
Yeah, hopefully they're not a thing in the past, but I think with COVID, we'll have to be careful at least until mid next year. So I won't commit into like any live event before. I would say will be tough. The first part of 2021 will be a tough one for live event for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. So if there is one last takeaway that you can share with us, one advice or recommendation or something that you wish you would have known when you started your career or when you started in your last role at JFrog, what would that be?
I will say one advice when embracing the demand generation career is accepting chance. So I'm using the word chance and not luck, because a bunch of campaigns you have happy results and sometimes you have accidental failure, and chance is always part of your campaign. Taking some examples, we have the webinars. The webinars and virtual events were working super well. I would say, in Q3, and they are not working as well in Q4. So you're trying to reproduce something that is successful and that for some reason won't work. And sometimes you have also happy accidents. Having a campaign, planning your campaign, and things are not going as you expect. And it's part of the game. Taking one example of my most famous happy accident, it was a highly targeted reactivation campaign on emails. And we were using, sending marketer emails, pretending to send on behalf of the SDRs, using the person first name, the company name for highly personalized emails. During that time, we had a consultant working for us, and that person, during maybe 10 hours, that person created some kind of upset in the Salesforce database. So basically, the name of the people were no longer in front of the right company. And so it was too late. Our campaign was scheduled and everything was sent. And so for 10 hours, people received email with the wrong company name. So when we realized that, I was like, you can guess, it was horrible. I was like, oh my God. And then what happened is that, let's say, so you're working at SAS MQL, and we send an email pretending you're working at Slack. And so, hello, Franco, like, I think Slack could benefit from our product. What about like a demo or a call? And so people send us like reply to those emails, and they said, okay, I'm not working at Slack. Your database is wrong. And they say, but if Slack is using your product or wants to use your product, I don't see why we shouldn't have a call. And so we actually generated some calls about those mistakes, like those horrible emails with a mismatch between the name of the company and the person. And we created some meetings out of that because people were like interested that knowing that the competitor was potentially customers of ours.
That's a funny one. I know, for example, companies that on purpose put typos on the ads to make them more genuine. I don't know if that works all the time, but there is this now trend that if a video ad is overproduced or the ad is overproduced, it comes across less genuine and more artifact. I don't know if that works all the time, but it's a very cool story. So thank you so much, Fanette. It was really a pleasure talking to you today. And again, thanks for spending time with us.
Well, thanks for having me as well.